the key to it all, big, small, one answer. We will yell this anthem, bring what it draws and kills all cancers. L-O-V-E.
Just a little jam about L-O-V-E. I love to get things started off here. Coming to you once again on this Thursday. I'm just gonna kick some randoms today once again. I've been doing a little bit of research here and there and everywhere, so I hope you guys enjoy. First off, we're gonna get into a little bit about a young Swedish dude. I can't remember his name, but this guy is my idol. Pure genius as far as I'm concerned. He somehow convinced the Swedish government to put him on disability. And that was mostly because of his disability or addiction to metal music, which I find hysterical. It's often been noted in my own personal life that I might have a bit of a problem with music. I tend to think about it all the time, listen to it all the time, driving my family members crazy when I've got it cranked and they're trying to watch television or something. I tend to focus in on it when I should be doing other things. So, yeah, man. Maybe I could follow in that gentleman's steps and get some pay to help me out because I'm not too functional without it. So I found that pretty interesting. Hopefully the Finns don't get wind of this guy. Reportedly, the Finnish people have more metal bands per capita than any other country in the world. I'm not sure what's going on there. So that's a bizarre one. Right. So on to I guess sort of the opposite side of music addiction. 5% of the population have what could only be described as a biological disdain or aversion to music. They call this musical anhedonia. And this means that these people often find music to be, knives in the ears, and they rather have silence over music. I can't imagine a life like that, but 5% of people out there experience this. So I don't know if my mother would be categorized as having musical anhedonia, but I certainly think for the most part she would opt for silence versus music. So anyways, that kind of makes me think about last week with Mother's Day upon us. I had gotten some inspiration for a card that I'd sent her. And this came to me from my Spotify playlist that I get every week, where it just generates a bunch of music that I should check out. Often it's stuff that I've never heard before, but it often will put in music of artists that I do listen to on a regular basis. And one of those songs that played was a song that maybe the good people at Spotify or the computer system, the algorithm that chooses these songs for me didn't know, but I was certainly more than acquainted with. They didn't realize that I'm rather intimate with this little jam by Mr. John Lennon. So I already mentioned that my mother, I think, preferred not to have any music at all. But she produced 4 youngins that were obsessed with music somehow. I'm not sure how that happened. Probably from my pops, because my pops always had music playing of all sorts. So this song comes from a little album called Double Fantasy by John Lennon. And growing up, when we would be taking our summer jaunts to the family cottage way up in Tobermory, this was the only album that my mother would tolerate. And it eventually became known as the Tobermory tape. So anytime I hear one of these songs, it brings back a lot of nostalgia for me. I think about some good times in my youth. And it wasn't until I was older, after listening to this album for years repeatedly, that I found out I didn't actually know the album in its entirety. It turns out that my father had recorded a special version of Double Fantasy. You see, Double Fantasy has a number of songs with John Lennon's wife there, Yoko Ono. And I don't know about you guys, if you've heard it, it is not good. She's just cackling on the mic there. It is horrible. I don't like it. So my father had recorded an album without those songs, just the John Lennon jams. And like I mentioned, lots of nostalgia coming back from this album. So that got me thinking about my mom's, and, so it was sort of the inspiration for my card that I had sent her on Mother's Day. And it got me thinking a little bit about Mr. John Lennon. He was definitely my favorite Beatle. He always had a little bit of a slight to him, a little bit of rebelliousness, often getting a little smarmy with interviewers. Most famously when someone had asked him if Ringo was the greatest drummer in the world, he responded stating that Ringo wasn't even the best drummer in the Beatles. So I thought that was an awesome little quip. So my first little bits of knowledge about John Lennon, well, it's going to be kind of about John and about the Beatles wholeheartedly. Hopefully I've found some stuff that you guys don't know. Lots of information out there about those people, but first up, I thought I might talk a little bit about a very infamous album, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, known for being a album that, changed the mold, man. Revolutionary in many ways in recording and songwriting. So if you don't know, the cover of Sgt. Pepper's has all sorts of cutouts of different famous people. Everyone from the occultist Aleister Crowley, Lenny Bruce, a comedian, Carl Jung, famous philosopher, Mae West, the actress, Edgar Allan Poe, the poet, Fred Astaire, the dancing machine, Oscar Wilde, the poet, Einstein. The list goes on. So many I couldn't even mention. But it turns out John, being the ever rebellious sort, he wanted a couple of images in there that he flat out got voted out of. He thought that it would be cool to have Jesus and Hitler. Pretty polarizing individuals there, to say the least. So, he got outvoted on that big time. But I'll play a little bit of a Good Morning jam from that great album there. Incidentally, that song playing there, Good Morning, was, I think, one of the first songs that utilized sampling, and quite revolutionary. Many bands went on to use that, and they do still to this day, so pretty cool. Now, another part of that album, there's a picture of the boys sitting there hanging out, the Fab Four, and they're all in their quasi-military gear, quite colorful and distinct. There's something in that photo that was pointed out a little while ago, and it's pretty interesting. So I'll see if I can give you guys a glimpse of it here, close enough that you can see what I'm talking about. Let's see, will that change? Alright, so there is the pick. Now, it's pretty hard to see in this photo. But if you look on Paul, in the blue there, down on his armband, there is a little black patch, and you can just make out the letters OP. Well, that is an OPP patch from our Ontario Provincial Police. So the question is, how the heck did Sir Paul wind up with an OPP patch? Well, it turned out on one of their glorious tours, they were leaving the airport from Toronto, YYZ, heading to Montreal, and a couple of representatives from the OPP decided to give them something unique, and they offered up some OPP patches to the Beatles. And several years later, maybe a couple, when, you know, the boys were coming up with their crazy outfits for that wonderful album, Paul decided to don the OPP patch. He felt like it fit in with that sort of military motif there. So pretty cool. Moving on, a little bit more about Mr. Lennon. Lennon had frequently stated that he would have preferred to be a member of Monty Python than to be a member of the Beatles. Found that one pretty interesting. All right, couple more things about John Lennon and the Beatles, but first up, I'm gonna cue up a little. Now, this is a cover, not the original. This is sort of a reggae version of the song "Oh Darling." Not from the album I'm going to talk about, but the name of this album sort of has a head nod to it. They referred to this album as the Yellow Dubmarine, as in dub music, which is a part of Reggae Man. So kind of cool if you want to check that out. They've done all sorts of Beatles tunes in more of a reggae fashion. So that brings me up to the topic of the album, Yellow Submarine. Now, if you haven't watched it, I remember watching it years and years and years ago. It is quite interesting. The animated movie, The Yellow Submarine, quite interesting. And incidentally, watching that when it was played on television in England was young Julian Lennon, John Lennon's son. And at this point, he didn't know that his father was a superstar. But watching that, he realized that one of the characters resembled his father quite a bit. And this is when he began to suspect that his dad was, in fact, a member of the Beatles, the biggest band in the world at the time. So that's pretty crazy. So something else that comes up out of this album that I think is super cool. I'm trying to see if I can pull up a pic that will show you what I'm talking about. This is the album cover. So let's see here. Yeah, that's pretty good there. A little rough, but notice John's character up top, and he's got a certain hand symbol that he's posting up there. That, to me, distinctly looks like something that has become quite popular in the heavier side of music these days. It looks like he's throwing up what they sometimes call the devil horns, right? You'll see that at every rock show known to man. People like throw these up to show some love to the band. That's what it kind of looks like. Although, you know, there's a lot of themes of love and things like that in Yellow Submarine, so perhaps the animators were actually drawing the hand sign in American Sign Language for I love you. I'm not sure, but anyway, I choose to think that that was the first reference to the devil horns there. Pretty cool stuff. All right, well, we're gonna move on from the Beatles and check out something totally different. We're gonna talk a little bit about a man by the name of Ben Franklin. Not really associated with music too much, but a big political figure, as you know, one of the founding fathers of the US of A. And also a bit of a dabbler in everything, including inventions. He invented several things, and most of those are fleeting me right now. But one of the coolest things he invented is an instrument called the glass harmonica. Now, it's come by different names, but I'm going to use that one for the time being. Harmonica, not harmonica. And this was a weird device. If you've ever witnessed someone playing wine glasses, you dip your finger in some fluid and then rub the edge, you get this really eerie tone. Sometimes people will set up a number of glasses in order to have different notes emanating from these wine glasses. So Ben really dug that, and he decided to make an instrument based on that principle. So this glass harmonica was almost like a piano style of setup, and there was all of these glass cylinders rotating in this box. And you could then wet your fingers and put your fingers onto these different cylinders, and as they spun, you would get these notes coming out of them. And quite a unique instrument, in my opinion. I'm going to play a little bit of a glass harmonica right now, and you'll hear it. I hope that's coming through on the mic there. So, some very ethereal notes coming from that thing. I think it's beautiful, but not everyone agreed, and we'll get into that. As a matter of fact, this became so popular in Europe that Mozart, who I'm going to talk a little bit about later, and Beethoven both composed pieces of music based on this instrument. But approaching the end of the 1800s, it began to fade. Not a popular instrument for a particular reason. It appears the Germans started to make some rumors or had some beliefs about these ethereal tones coming from this instrument, and they began to think that there was ties to people losing their minds by listening to this. So be forewarned, if you're listening to my little webisode today, that these tones very well could make you go crazy. I don't believe that for a moment, but anyways, I will cite some writing from a German musicologist by the name of Johann Rochlitz, and he had said that the instrument excessively stimulates the nerves and plunges the player into a nagging depression, and hence into a dark, melancholy mood that is an apt method for slow self-annihilation. Wow, intense stuff. He also went on to say, if you are suffering from any nervous disorder, you should not play it at all. And if you are not yet ill, you should not play it excessively. And one more cautionary advice from Rochlitz. If you are sad, you should not play it, or else play uplifting pieces. So, that's pretty interesting. I'm not sure why they felt that this instrument was tied to one's mental faculties and their sanity, but it is kind of outer worldly. Some of the pieces I've heard played on it, so that could have been part of it. But anyways, I find that pretty interesting, and the instrument does continue to find its way into popular music here and there, but it's quite a rarity. You can still get these things manufactured, and it's kind of a fringe thing, but there's a lot of people still learning to play them, and yeah, quite a little interesting bit of musical history as far as I'm concerned. Right, so I also mentioned Mozart. He had written some pieces of music to coincide with that particular instrument, and that was pretty cool. But something that I learned when I was diving into Mozart recently that I find rather interesting is that he wrote some music that I think could, I think some people would prefer to have banned or forgotten about. Turns out that Mozart was a little bit of a dirty bird, and I'll play a snippet of one song that he wrote. It's got 6 parts for singing in it, so I'll play a little snippet here, hopefully. Let's see how that comes through. Where's my volume? So obviously that tune is in German, and kind of a nice little ditty, but the subject matter is rather interesting, and I have a feeling, like I said, that some of those music snobs out there might not be too happy that this song was out there. The song is entitled, I'm going to butcher the German, I'm sure, Leck mich im Arsch, and also known as Canon B flat for 6 voices. And that German actually translates literally to lick my ass. So it turns out that Mozart had a little bit of, he was a big fan of scatological humor, also known as bathroom humor. And he wrote numerous letters to people discussing bodily functions and pooping the bed and all sorts of things. So there you go, music snobs. Mozart had the mentality of a prepubescent boy and loved fart jokes. Now that is what I call a classic, right? All right, well, keeping with that theme of music that should be banned or was banned, I'm going to jump into one that I imagine a lot of people have heard. You may or may not have known what it was called. It's been utilized in a number of movies and so forth. It's just an instrumental. But for a time, this song was actually banned. It's a tune by the man named Link Wray. And I'll play a little snippet. So why on earth would an instrumental be banned? What could be offensive about this? Well, at the time, the 1950s, there was a lot of fear about juvenile delinquency and gang violence, and there's something about the rough side of this tune that, I don't know, the powers that be felt that this song was going to make the kids go ape, and the song was entitled Rumble, so that's kind of a throwback to, the gangs fighting and so forth. I don't know, it doesn't really make me want to go stab somebody or anything. It's just a tune, right? But anyway, for quite some time, it was banned on the radio waves. But the kids fought back and kept requesting, and eventually they lifted the ban on this, realizing that it is just a song and it wasn't going to hurt anybody. Something else kind of interesting about that song that I found out was that it was spawned from a improvised attempt to play a cover tune that someone had requested at a dance, and the band and Link Ray didn't know how to play it, so they just kind of messed around and jammed out some notes, and the kids went crazy apparently. So that sparked some inspiration to put down a recording of this song because of the reaction from the kids. And while they were in the studio, Ray, he wanted to sort of recapture that ruckus that went on when they were playing this originally live, and the dirtiness of it and the rawness. So he reportedly had busted a couple of holes in his guitar amp, and inadvertently he ended up creating what's now known as a fuzz box. Now that's usually done with digital technology these days, but that's what gave that guitar that raunchy, distorted sound that wasn't really in effect back then. And it's gone on to become synonymous with guitar music in general. So very cool. Link Ray leaving his mark on music in so many ways. And of course, like I mentioned, getting his music banned. So that is that. All right, well, we're going to take a step away from all that band music and maybe take a look at a tiny bit of music, about 7 seconds to be exact. Now, this I will break down for you and explain why 7 seconds of music would be so important. This 7 seconds spawned the backdrop to countless songs, well over 2,000. I would suggest. I don't even think you could calculate how many times this 7 seconds has come up. It's been twisted around, slowed down, sped up, chunked out into different pieces and rearranged, but it is a very important piece of music. So this originally came to us on the B side of a 45 put out by a little group called the Winstons. The 45, I think the song was Color Your Father, and it was a good jam. I believe they won a Grammy the following year for that, 1970. But the B-side is where we're interested, and the song on the B-side was called Amen Brother. So I'll play a little snippet of that. I don't expect anyone to really know it. I didn't know it. So this is once again an instrumental song. It's an instrumental interpretation of an old gospel tune called Amen Brother. Groovy little tune nonetheless. Slow her down, quiet her down a little bit so I can chat. So, years and years later, the hip-hop genre, in particularly the breakdancers, were creating this music that relied on taking samples or snippets of a whole song, just taking certain parts and mixing it up and looping that and playing it in a different manner. And, if you think back to the 80s where you'd see these DJs, doing the record scratch thing and all that nonsense. I know that some don't consider it music. I see it as just another art form, so whatever. But one particular aspect of that was these so-called break beats. And a part that I'm going to play for you in a moment, they ended up putting on a compilation album, something like the Ultimate Break Beats or something like that, in the early 80s. And Ultimate Beats and Breaks was the name of it. So a break is just a quick drum breakdown. And like I mentioned, this song, Amen Brother, there was a very infamous breakdown, 7 seconds long. So I'm going to try to cue it up close enough to it, and I'll let you hear the original. This is from the song Amen Brother. But listen to this 7 seconds. That's it right there. Just a few cool little beats, and bam, it gets put on this compilation album. Just those 7 seconds. And before you know it, several hip hop groups had adopted or, got wind of that and loved it and used it for the backdrop to their music. So I'm going to bust out a couple of examples and we'll talk a little bit more about that. First up, a little group called Salt and Pepper with their song called I Desire.
We're on a mission, dissing all of the opposition. MCs, it's my butt you're kissing, cause I desire.
That drum beat right there is made and created entirely from that snippet that I played you. So that was I Desire, another well-known tune in the hip-hop community from some gangster rappers known as NWA. There was just a movie about them with the title of this song as the name of the movie, Straight Outta Compton. And I'm only going to be able to play a little bit of this because, they're not known for using the best language. So hold on, Straight Outta Compton.
You are now about to witness the strength of street knowledge.
There we go. There's that drum beat once again. All right, and the list will continue to go on. Here's another one, Keep It Going Now by Rob Bass and
Keep it going now.
There's that drum beat again. Once again, another tune called Casualties of War. A couple seconds till it comes in.
Casualties of war.
Here comes that drum beat again. And I mean, I could go on and on and on, but the point being that numerous rap songs use that. Now, as music evolved and more people became aware of these so-called break beats, a whole couple of genres of music grew up around that specific drum beat, if you can believe it. There was some stuff that was pretty popular when I was a youngin'. In the rave scene, if you know anything about that stuff. And so there was this genre called, which they refer to as jungle. Had a lot of interesting sounds, weird, wacky drum beats, really sped up and stuttery sounding. But a number of them utilized this drum beat yet again. So I'm going to play a little bit of one called Atlantis. And I'm going to way sped up, but that is yet again that same 7 seconds thrown in a loop over and over again. Crazy how this little hardly, well-known group had created this song, not realizing that would go on to revolutionize music. I'll play something else from more of the...
When I walk into a dance, the bouncers don't frisk me.
More of the
They
jungle
salute me.
style of music,
You know
as
why?
it's called.
Never know you Kapachi, Rudy Jungle. Who tell every boy what you know, man? Me a the nutter, original, mad nutter.
So I would say that it's almost impossible to recognize this drum beat because it's been so sped up and changed. But I assure you, it is from the exact snippet that I played earlier. And they've just mixed it up and put it into some sequencers and really altered it so that it's almost unrecognizable. One more here before I carry on. This one is a little tune that was well known in the clubs at the time, called Super Sharp Shooter. And let's see here. Here we go. Once again, the drums are super cut up and weird sounding, not very human, but I assure you, they are using that same 7 seconds of drums. I don't know about you guys, but I just find that amazing. And odd that somehow that tiny little piece could be blown up. Like I said, genres of music were built around those 7 seconds. So strange how everybody just jumped on that particular break beat, as it's called. And sort of I guess a sad note is that the Winstons, up until very recently, got no love for that. Everybody was using their music, at least one particular part of their music, but they received, up until recently, no royalties whatsoever, no love sent their way, usually not even so much as an acknowledgement that people had used their music and repurposed it. And in fact, the very drummer that was responsible for that cool little breakdown, Gregory Coleman, I believe his name is, actually died back in 2006, I believe, and he was homeless and penniless, and probably had no idea of his impact on music. So that's crazy. I don't know how to even get my head wrapped around that. I mean, I love that people are able to do these kind of things nowadays and take what's already there and repurpose it and make it their own. I love that. Some people don't. Some people argue that it's plagiarism. I think it's a totally different form of art, so whatever. But I think you gotta give a head nod to who you're robbing from, who you're borrowing from, and it's pretty sad that no one thought to do so. They just went crazy with it. So anyways, guys, that is my random list for today. Had a lot of fun doing some of the research on that one, I'll tell you. Especially the Mozart business. That just floored me. I had no idea he was such a dirty bird. Yeah, I've been getting a couple of comments here and there on some of my videos. I love hearing from you dudes. Feel free to shout out to me anytime. I'll try to get back to you. That's for sure. Yeah, man, everyone be safe, stay strong. Just remember, tough times never last, but tough people do, man. So be tough. I know you guys are tough, but hold on. And yeah, maybe we will see each other soon. All right, take care, guys. Have a good one. Apparently, I don't know how to get out of this. So, that's a rough ending here. Oh my goodness. Take it easy, guys. There we go.